So there's a gentleman by the name of Bekzat Almakhan who neither one of us had heard about prior to about 2 weeks ago, but he's going to be making his debut in the UFC against none other than Umar Nurmagomedov. And this is kind of emblematic of who Umar is as a fighter. He's like, look, I just want to be active and I want to take fights against the best fighters that are willing to sign a contract to step in the octagon with me. And as of right now, nobody in the top 10 is willing to do it. So I'll take Bekzat on. He's got a 17-1 record, very knockout heavy, some beautiful head kick finishes in his fights, power in his hands. It's a very high risk, pretty much low reward for Umar to take on it, or no reward. Even if he wins this fight against a debut fighter, well, duh, you were supposed to. And if he loses, it completely derails everything that he's trying to amass to get to that title shot that's been eluding him for this long. But Bekzat obviously has some belief in his skills. He's a plus 500 underdog, but you don't take a debut fight against Umar unless you really think you got the goods.
Yeah, this is a great fight, but to me, it's very scary for Umar Nurmagomedov to fight somebody who literally the world doesn't know yet.
Right.
And trust me, we've figured out after seeing it time and time again that there's guys in certain regions of the world that are freaking animals.
Yes.
They come into UFC and they start murdering guys, and then they have this meteoric rise. Look at Khamzat Chimaev. You know, he's 5-0 or whatever when he gets into the UFC, and then in 9 days he's got 2 UFC wins, right? So it's just crazy. And you go, okay, well, we understand now that that guy wasn't in the UFC, but he certainly doesn't belong anywhere but the top 10 of the UFC now. Like, he's going to hurt people if he's on a regional fight promotion. Like, this
or
is
even
safe.
fighting outside the top 15.
Right. And that's why you see these sorts of rises. And I think that, you know, Umar Nurmagomedov is, on any given night, the best bantamweight in the world. I think for sure if somebody would have said, hey, Umar's the next up for a title shot against Sugar Sean O'Malley, everybody would go, okay, seems right. And if you also told him that, all right, Umar, we want you to fight an unranked guy. Nobody's ever heard of him. He's coming out of Kazakhstan. His last fight was in an octagon that looked like they threw it together in 30 minutes. There's Persian rugs on
Carpet
the floor.
on the floor.
Yeah, like you're going to go fight that guy in some sort of, you know, back alley organization that nobody's ever heard of, and he's going to go, okay, don't bat an eye at it. Is this guy good? Yeah, well, he's 17-1. He's got 13 finishes and by KO and some other submissions, and he's basically great everywhere. These guys, it speaks to the belief system, the way they operate, and they love the merit system. Look, this guy has earned the right into the UFC, and the fact that Umar's willing to extend a hand when he could clearly be like, no, I'm a top 5 guy. I'm clearly one of the best bantamweights in the world. Give me a big name. Give me somebody that's above me that I can climb towards the title against. The fact that he's doing this speaks volumes about Umar Nurmagomedov, because that shows he's willing to fight anyone, anywhere, anytime, even if he doesn't really know much about this guy. And it also speaks volumes to the new guy, and forgive me if I say it wrong, Bekzat. Bekzat literally making his UFC debut. Most of the time, if you don't get your hand raised in the UFC debut, they're looking at you as a stepping stone. They're looking at you as somebody they can build the next guy off of. And if you don't do really well in your 4-fight contract, the first one you got from the UFC, it's walking papers. You're on your way back to a regional scene. And that, to me, is a high risk, high reward for him, because if he doesn't get his hand raised against Umar, now he's 0-1 in the UFC, and he's going to have to do some heavy lifting and climbing back into the rankings. So this fight to me is very interesting. I think Umar has all of the pressure on him, but I think these guys have ice running through their veins, both of them. I don't think it phases him. And look, at the end of the day, the cream rises always. And Umar Nurmagomedov is one of the best fighters on the planet. In my opinion, as the UFC's entire roster sits right now, I've got him somewhere in the top 5, maybe top 7 most complete mixed martial artists on the entire roster. I think he's really good everywhere. And this whole notion that Dagestani fighters are wrestling heavy, grappling heavy, and they can't strike with you is just a false thing. It's a thing of the past, and nobody believes it, and nobody realizes it anymore. But these guys are super technical on the feet. They've picked up some really interesting boxing skills from the Russian boxing style, and they've also started to create some interesting karate stances and karate situations for mixed martial arts that make them deadly on the striking, because nobody's going to look to take somebody like Umar Nurmagomedov down. The last name alone scares them away from doing that. So this opens up wild striking, extremely aggressive and explosive stuff. And if you aren't watching out, you could wind up getting slept by these guys. And then eventually you're left to do nothing but get taken down by them, choked out, or beat up on the ground. And it's kind of a lose-lose, out of the frying pan into the fire type of situation with these guys. But I have a feeling the more guys we see come out of this region, the more impressive the UFC roster is going to continue to get.
Yeah, no doubt. And I mean, let's be honest, my money's on Umar. He's a proven commodity, but I did go back and watch about 6 or 7 of Bekzat's fights. This guy's real good. I mean, he's got some lightning fast head kicks that he has almost no tell on. He's finished several opponents with that. His hands are good. He's clearly in great shape. Some of his body lock takedown work is phenomenal. So he's a real opponent.
Not to cut you off, he's actually stopped people, and they've basically tapped verbally from his strikes.
Yeah, the no mas situation with one of the gentlemen that he fought. I can't remember his name, but there was a head kick, and that guy was like, yeah, we're all good here. I'm not getting paid nearly enough to eat another one of those. So
get me off this Persian rug and get me out of here.
Get me out of here and get me to a doctor. So this guy has a finishing style. He's a very powerful fighter. And look, you can be as good as Umar Nurmagomedov is, and as you said, he's probably top 5, top 7 when you're talking about the full spectrum of skill as far as grappling, striking, clinch work, conditioning, cardio. Umar's about as buttoned up as you can get. His kicks are insane, which, by the way, I'm really excited to see the kick battle in this fight because both these guys have some nasty head kicks.
Very nice.
I think this fight's going to end in finish. I think it'll probably be Umar, but I think that Bekzat, while it is true what you said, that if you go 0-1 in the UFC, they're going to look to build some guys off of you. Bekzat is going to be in a little bit of a different boat, in my opinion, because he is young. It is Umar, after all. I mean, how many people have taken their first fight against a Nurmagomedov, somebody who's in the top 5? So I think that even if he loses, which is the likely outcome, he's going to be treated by the UFC as somebody who's game. Because one thing we know about Dana White and the matchmakers, if you say yes to the fight that nobody wants to say yes to, even if you fall short, they reward you. Just think about, somebody who's not near to the skill level of Bekzat, but a Chris Moutinho. When you step in off the couch and fight Sean O'Malley and give him a good fight, you know what? You get a contract. And
not only do the matchmakers love it, the fans love it too. They love to see that sort of stuff happen. And that's why I think you're right about that. My thought on, he takes a hard fall if he loses to Umar is right in some ways, but at the same time, they're going to cut him some slack. They realize that you can count on 0 fingers how many times Umar Nurmagomedov has been called out in a post-fight speech with Joe Rogan or whoever else is manning the microphone that night. Nobody wants that fight. I'm sure when managers get on the phone with the matchmakers and they say, hey, we got Umar Nurmagomedov, he's available for you, they basically hang up on Mick Maynard and Sean Shelby and all those guys. Like, we don't want any part of that. Give us a Cody No Love or something like that, So for me, I think these guys, they hear this, oh, I got an opportunity in the UFC. Right now I'm fighting on Persian rugs in the middle of nowhere, Kazakhstan. Yeah, give me that opportunity. I believe in my skills. I know I'm good enough to compete with anybody in the world, and that's the mentality you have to have if you want to be a UFC world champion, if you want to be the highest level mixed martial artist out there. And look, that speaks volumes to this Bekzat fella. I'm excited to see him in the UFC, and if you're willing to take on Umar in your debut fight, then to me, you belong in the UFC.
You certainly do. And you said it beautifully in the beginning of the video. There's people in this world who you've never heard of, who are from obscure corners of the world, that have just had their nose down to the grindstone forever. And when I say forever, I mean since like they were 4 years old. They were wrestling and doing striking and mixing it together and competing in combat Sambo. And yes, a lot of them do come from the area of the world that Umar and Shavkat and those guys are from. And so don't be surprised if Umar Nurmagomedov has to dig deep. Don't be surprised if Umar Nurmagomedov gets hit, if his face is a little busted up. We're used to seeing Umar look post-fight like he did pre-fight. That may not be the case this time. He is a -700 favorite, but this guy's a really good fighter, and just because he doesn't have a name that we would all recognize, he's very skilled, and he's going to be a tough opponent.
Yeah, and if he beats Umar Nurmagomedov, then it's off to the races for him. But I'm not going to go ahead and make my prediction because I think we should do another video on this, but I think the matchmakers have this right. Umar Nurmagomedov has basically shown no flaws in his UFC career, and we're basically talking about an unknown commodity right now. We can't speak on how good this guy actually is because we don't know the depth and the strength of schedule that he had outside of the UFC. Once you get to the UFC, you're truly in the game.
Right.
We understand, okay, this guy beat Rob Font, so we know exactly where he sits. You know, this guy beat Cody Nolov. This guy beat TJ Dillashaw. We understand where they sit if we've seen them on the UFC's roster. Right now, he's an unknown. I can't wait to see this fight.
Me either. And just one more point to what you said there. There's a lot of guys who have beautiful records with a whole bunch of knockouts before they get into the UFC, and then it's straight decisions when they join the organization. So the UFC is the cream. If you're the cream, you rise to the top, and if you're not, it shakes out real quick. And for Bekzat, he's getting thrown right in there.
Yeah, and I don't know whose job it is for the UFC to find these guys in these obscure corners of the world, but whoever it is, they're doing a bang-up job.
Congrats. Yeah.